Welcome to this maybe fifth lecture on Wagner's life and work, and today I shall try to speak about these three last operas, namely Tristan, Mastersingers and Parsifal. So there are three huge topics. I wonder what I have time to, how much time I have to deal with them, but I try to say at least something, because that's important. And as I told in Nibelungen, Wagner made interval between the second and third act of Siegfried when he wrote Tristan and Mastersingers, and then Parsifal was left as his last work. Now, Tristan, of course, is something which many people consider maybe the main work of Richard Wagner altogether. It is something which even those who are his adversaries and who dislike his music otherwise, they accept. And there are sound reasons for this, namely Tristan is counted to be in the history of European art music, especially tonal music, in a very decisive position, namely in the crisis of the romantic harmony movement towards atonality, because in Tristan no longer the dominant seventh chords are resolved. They can be what they are, and the music is freely modulating with a quite free formal structure without anything which was preceding in Wagner. So Wagner himself said to Cosima later that he wanted in Tristan Musicales auszurausen. Musicales auszurausen, it means to be furious or rage with music, without the straitjacket of a dramatic form, without any demands, requirements of the stage, the scenery. So this means that Tristan became rather symphonic work, and it proves the theory which have been defended that his music basically is symphonic by its nature. Tristan, he got the ideas rather early, but the starting point was Gottfried von Strasbourg's novel or poem, which was stemming from I think from the 12th century. It takes place in Cornwall and Scotland, Ireland, in that area, and it's a story which includes many grey knights, which then appear also in his other operas, so to say. And of course he first prepared the prose sketch and then started composing. Composing took place when he was in Switzerland, exile, and rather much in touch with Franz Liszt. Richard had as his assistant Karl Ritter, young man who was music critic and who made a kind of libretto from Tristan story for Wagner's use. Wagner certainly used a little bit this Karl Ritter's version. Ritter, who was an interesting personality, who was very much together with the parties, about which we have funny stories, like the one I have to tell you, namely once Franz Liszt was at a dinner, and Liszt praised the Jesuits and their role in French culture, and then Karl Ritter had a habit to have a mysterious smile, smiling something, and this irritated Liszt, who perhaps interpreted in a different manner, and then he said, Liszt, moreover, that without French Academy we would all be like pavillons. But then it occurred that Karl Ritter had been mocked in his student circles by his face, which looked like pavilion. And so Ritter thought that this was an insult, and he smiled again, but he left the house and said that he will never get back to Wagner's house any longer. No, in fact it happened some years later, but anyway, this shows how dramatic the relations could be there. Then what had an impact in the sonority and sound was certainly that Richard got as a gift parcel from Paris from an Erard grand piano. He had bought a from Breitkopf Hertel one grand piano in his Dresden years, but now he got this Erard, which everyone who knows the mechanism, it's different. So by Erard you can make the so-called jeu perlé playing, which is important in some Liszt etudes. And this was important for Wagner. He just listened to these wonderful sonorities of his Erard and started to sketch the second act, the love scene of Tristan, on this klang or sound basis, so to say. So that became important. Now then, of course, in his private life, it was extremely stormy period with relations with to many directions, to Mathilde von Wesendonck and her husband Otto, because Wagner lived in their house for a while. And as we know, Mathilde was a kind of poetess who wrote her poems, which Richard then composed. And one of them, namely Im Treibhaus, Richard then, or Wagner, then used in Tristan's last act. It is direct move there, so it's from that period. And then, of course, it occurred that Hans von Bülow came to a visit. Also, it was I think in Lucerne or Zurich in Switzerland, and with his wife Cosima and their children, because Bülow was a great Wagnerian and admirer of Richard. But that was rather fateful, because then rather soon started the quite passionate relationship between Isolde, between Cosima, who a kind of Isolde in his mind, and Wagner, which again caused the controversy with Franz Liszt, because after what happened, Liszt could never forgive it, namely that Wagner had seduced the wife of his best and most beloved pupil, Hans von Bülow, who was great pianist and conductor of the time. So always later, when Liszt came to visit to Villa Wanfried, Cosima was crying and weeping several days before and after, thinking of what might happen then between them. Anyway, let us forget these anecdotes and go to the thing itself. Namely, Tristan as an opera is indeed in a quite particular position. The roles there are Tristan, who is tenor, and King Mark is bass figure, Isolde is soprano, then Kurvenal, who is Tristan's helper and servant, is baritone. Then there's Melot, he's a courtier, he's a tenor, he is just the person who tries to kill Tristan. Brangene is the maid of Isolde, she's also soprano. And then we have additionally a shepherd, a steersman, and a young sailor, and then sailors, knights, and squires. So there is a little bit choral part there, but not decisively. Now, if we think of the music itself, of course, it is very much based around one chord, which is perhaps the most analyzed and best known chord in the whole European art music, the so-called Tristan chord, which opens the prelude and is then, of course, repeated there later. And the Tristan chord is just something like this. So it's very dissonant, and there are many analyses and theories what it is, but one of the most reasonable theories is perhaps in this study by French professor Jacques Chadier in his book on analysis on Tristan, because he simply sees that it is a series of appoggiature notes which are gradually added. The initial scheme is very simple. We are in A minor and we have here in dominant. But then you put their neighbor notes gradually, more and more, so that we get the next version. Then we add there also to the bass line appoggiatura. And moreover, you put in the middle part in the alto, put also there. And then you are. And there you are. So it's simply based on these appoggiaturas, but it has a quite central role in the whole opera, and it is heard just in the beginning of the whole opera. So I see this already in this phase. But let's see, the plot is not terribly complicated, but it's a love story, the most passionate Wagner ever wrote. First act takes place at sea on the deck of Tristan's ship. So we are now moving from Ireland to Cornwall, and we are in the early Middle Ages. There has been a fight against the King Morold, whom Tristan has killed and cut his head and sent this head to the bride of Morold, Isolde. So Isolde has full reason to deeply hate Tristan in this situation. Then later Tristan has got wounded seriously, and Isolde has been taking care of him and with intention to kill certainly Tristan, but then at the end she was not able to do that, and so they arrive to be in the same boat, and Tristan is bringing Isolde to be the wife of King Mark, who is his king, his uncle, Tristan's uncle. That is the, and now the boat is sailing on the sea, and it is approaching the coast when Isolde appears with Brangere. They have a dialogue, and the whole music is extremely dramatic, tensional, dissonant, and it is full of this gloomy, austere atmosphere of these events which took place, and which and the idea of revenge which Isolde wants to do. Now then the sailors announce that now the land is seen, and then Isolde thinks that she might invite Tristan to visit her cabin, and she sends Brangere to invite. Now then at the end Tristan arrives, and they have a dialogue which is characterized by this deep enmity, but at the end Isolde offers a drink potion to Tristan. They decide to drink together, but Isolde's mother has been a sorcerer, and she has had at her luggage different types of potions. So there are deadly potions which kill, and then there are love potions. And then Brangere, I think by mistake, she confuses the killing potion to the love potion. So instead of killing potion, she gives the love potion. So that when Tristan and Isolde, when they together drink it, suddenly the music changes. There's a total transformation of the atmosphere, and they fall in love with each other definitely. We might think we are here, yes. Here they drink. So suddenly we have the same music as at the beginning, so it resolves and it becomes beautiful. And they sing Tristan, Isolde, Treulosen, Holder, Selig, Frau. So suddenly it changes altogether. So this is one of the most congenial transformation scenes in the whole history opera. I would only compare with Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker when the Christmas Eve, suddenly comes the night, and then suddenly the fairy tale world emerges, and the music changes totally differently from what it was previous. Maybe that was an impact of Wagner, I don't know. Well, anyway, they arrive, and then King Mark wishes them welcome, and then in the second act they are in the garden of King Mark, and Isolde is there, and Isolde is waiting for Tristan, and there is a sign that there is a torch which was burning as a signal. When the torch is switched off, that will be the sign that then Tristan can enter the garden. So Isolde asks Brangäne to take away the torch, and Tristan arrives, and we have this music which he is rushing passionately first, and they meet each other, and then takes place this very, very long love scene, probably the longest one in the history of opera, between Isolde and Brangäne is following it at a distance, and at the end, when this opens, we have these horn signals. It's the King Mark is far away. It's full of these hunting topics. Like that. And we shall turn so halt. She's singing there, we have this scene in which at the end of this, the love music itself sweet harmonies. But at the end, when already it's closing, we have this music. then suddenly the mark arrives, and they are met there. There is a dramatic contrast there, and there becomes a fight. So that then the Melot, the helper of King Mark, attacks Tristan. They have a fight in which they are both wounded. I think Melot is probably killed, I think, but Tristan is seriously wounded, but stays alive, however. So it is like that. Then the third movement takes place on the other side of the bay, and in Bretagne. It's in the castle of Carol of Tristan, and he's lying there on bed, wounded, seriously wounded, and he has hallucinations. He's totally ill. Here we had the tribe house music. There are these interesting solos by Sailorman. Solo when they are waiting. So music is like stagnated in the expectation. They are waiting for Tristan, and Kurvina are all waiting that Isolde will come by boat. That's the only thing. And it's rather long, this dialogue and monologue of Tristan. And then at the end the boat is approaching, and they think that now it is Isolde, but it is not. And then Tristan dies. And then, but then Isolde's boat really arrives, and Isolde rushes on stage and meets only Tristan, his body, and then Isolde just so to say has the famous Liebestode. So she just transfigures. She just also passes away, so to say. And then at the end, also King Mark arrives, and then here it is Melot and Kurvina. I think they kill each other, and so King Mark notices, aha, here are only dead people. How terrible! And he only complains his fate in this on the stage. So, but anyway, perhaps the best known thing in the whole opera is, of course, Isolde's Liebestod, which Franz Liszt made an arrangement in his Liszt transcriptions, and it has been played by many. The latest wonderful performance of this I heard by Danish-Finnish pianist Frans Ellegaard, who really played it in Paris. It is, it is just this we are in A flat major. So we A flat. We have C flat major, which is the same as B major, and by the way, this ends in B major. So it is a kind of transcendental act gesture. This. grows all the time. But I think there are several waves, so to say, in this. And it closes, as I said. E major. So, certainly one of the most often played and popular Wagnerian tunes altogether. So that is the Tristan. But now we must go ahead. And almost at the same time, when he was doing Tristan, he had also this Mastersingers in his mind. And we know that the first prose version is from 1845, so very early, even in his Dresden years. But music began in 1862 during Swiss exile, and the full score finished in 1867. Third performance for Königliches Hof und Nationaltheater in Munich for Ludwig certainly June 1868, and then it was rather quick. It became very popular. Wagner had been very disappointed that his operas, these early operas, Tannhäuser, Lohengrin, Dutchman, and all these others, and Ring had not been performed so much, or not at all. For instance, he had never heard himself Lohengrin, because Liszt did it in Weimar, but Wagner couldn't go to Weimar, which was Germany. And so he had the crazy idea it was some kind of conspiracy of the Jewish people against him, that his operas are not performed at all. Anyway, Mastersingers became very popular, and it is the only comedy Wagner wrote. That is the most important thing to know about at the beginning. So it is definitely a comedy in which everything definitely is seen in the light of humor. It's very humorous. And the plot brings us back to the medieval German, or late medieval time of Hans Sachs, one of those famous singers, and who was also a craftsman in Nuremberg. So Nuremberg, historic Nuremberg, is the place. Wagner had seen the Nuremberg, its old center, which had been preserved and inspired by this, what he saw there. But this Nuremberg of Wagner, it is not the historic one. It's pure reconstruction. It is kind of a utopian society, which is very ecological, I would say, because if you think who are those master singers, they are different artisans like Hans Sachs, who is a cobbler or shoemaker, Herr Wagner, who is the goldsmith, Herr Vogelgesang, who is a furrier, Mr. Nachtigall, who is a smith, Mr. Beckmesser, he is a town clerk, Beckmesser, who becomes center there as a comic figure, Kotner, who is a baker, Zorn, who is something, and then Eislinger is a grocer, Moser is a tailor, Ortel is a soap maker, and Schwarz is stocking treater, and Fitz is coppersmith. There they are. Okay, so they all represent these handicraft, these guilds, so-called traditional guilds, which were very well organized and which had their own songs indeed. And this Meistergesang has been much studied, and the melodies were almost always the same, but they composed also new poetry. The structure, real structure of Mastersinger was quite simple. It was in the form A-B. So it was Stollen, they called it Stollen was the first phrase. Then it was repeated, say similarly, other Stollen. And then came something totally else, namely Abgesang. These first two Stollens were called Aufgesang, which opened the song, and then came the latter. And they had strict rules how they should be done, and everyone had to follow. If someone broke these rules, they had this table of different punishments. What person must undergo if he didn't follow these laws of what they have given. Now all this is seen in a very humorous sense in Wagner, because they are parodized with keeping strict with the rules, and they Beckmesser, whose song in the competition then is following this, is portrayed totally funny and comical. Now, then in the opera there is indeed competition, and goldsmith Wagner, who is the leader of this, has promised his daughter Eva as the bride to the one who writes the best master song for the competition. That will be the salary. And everyone is just trying to reach it, and so that situation. And it opens in Nuremberg, in St. Katharina Church. There is a singing ceremony. They have the Luther type chorale already there, which is invented by Wagner. And there appears a young man, nobleman, Walter von Stolzing. He's a young knight from Franconia, tenor, and he wants to become a great poet and composer directly. He's trusting in his great talent and gifts. And he sees Eva in the community, and they start flirting immediately. So that immediately when we are in the church, immediately starts this comical this love affair also. So then there is a meeting of the Mastersingers, and Walter Stolzing is introduced, and he sings as a test one song, but it is not accepted by these Mastersingers at all. Then there is Beckmesser, who is the chief of the chorus, and is against Walter, and also he wants to get the hand of Eva. But then the second act takes place in night time in Nuremberg street, and there Beckmesser tries to give a serenade to Eva, but his song is quite funny. But by the way, his song is, if you see the notes, transcriptions of authentic songs, is following these rules rather exactly. And then, well, it is tricky. Eva and Walter are there, and they plan an escape when Zax, who is also there, and Zax is just hammering his shoes. There is the portrayal of this handicraft. And also Zax is in love with Eva and would like to get his hand. But the end, the whole scene ends with, it's in the midsummer night, Johannistag, they say. It ends with the big kalabalik, because the citizens, they are awakened by this singing, and they come on street and they start to fight each other, and there is total chaos. So Wagner portrays this total chaos. Music is totally chaotic, dissonant, and it ends when the guard comes with his lamp and says that now it's midnight, now it's time to go to sleep. Third act opens in the Hans Zax's workshop. He's sitting there alone, and now the music changes totally. Music is quite meditative. Zax is totally frustrated by the general, he calls it Wahn. It's just the frivolity and bad manners of his time, and he's very pessimist of the future. Walter Stolting appears and tells that he has now, in the dream, composed a wonderful song which might be winner. And then he asks Hans Zax advice how to build a real Meistersingers. And then Hans Zax tells exactly how it is and how long are the stolen. And by the way, when Wagner had his theory of so-called Dichteris Musicalis Periode, here we have it exactly what was his poetical musical period. It's quite clearly said. And Zax tells that this song must follow the rules, but Mastersingers have put there also their life experience. So they are, when one is young, one is excited, one has the freshness of the young emotions, but in the old days, when the winter comes, then they only remember what happened, but all this experience must be somehow reflected by the song, which is the product of the whole life experience, and he very beautifully portrays that. Then Eva comes there, and at the end, Hans Zax decides to give up Eva in favor of Walter for a younger person. So he has this resignation. He resigns. Resignation. Wagner said once to Cosima that the most common notion in the world is resignation. Resignation. But then comes finally the Midsummer Fest. We gather on a big field. The whole town comes there. It's very cheerful, and there appear in the procession all the arts. There are bakers, farmers, shoemakers. They have their own songs and dances. There's a ballet scene, which are very, very rare. And then starts the competition. I forgot. In the Zax chamber, after when Walter has left it, comes Beckmesser alone. And there is a long pantomime section when Beckmesser is searching for the master song, and he sees the song written on the table of Hans Zax, and then he takes it, he steals it, and he's going to perform it as his own song in the competition. So now in the last act starts the real competition, and they announce it. It is announced and opened, and first Beckmesser sings his song, but it sounds quite terrible, and the audience starts to laugh at it quite. So they think it's totally crazy, his song. The reason is that Hans Zax had changed the notes and annotation, so that the song which Beckmesser was performing was not at all the one which Walter Stolting had done. So then comes Walter Stolting, and he gives the prize song, Stolen Abgesang, and the audience is all immediately interested and then fascinated, and then they are jubilating. That is the prize, that is the real song, and they join to it, and music becomes very, very lively and extremely melodious. Then quite at the end, when they already planned to give the Eva to Walter and give the laureate, Hans Sachs speaks and he tells of how the master song is going to its end. Its time is end, and the whole Roman Empire will collapse. But what will remain is the Holde Deutsche Kunst. So what remains is the holy German art. And then the crowd accepts this, and then we have the finale. So that is the plot after all. But the music is really something quite outstanding and different and distinguishing in Wagnerian world. There are many points which should be remembered, but for the first, we have this idea of the song which has its rules which are generated by the rules, but there are three types of songs. There is this quite mechanic academic generation by Beckmesser, who follows only rules. Then there is the other opposite, and that is made parodical and ironic. Then there is Walter Stolzing, who is full inspiration and enthusiasm, but even that is something rather funny, because even that song is given in a humorous sense by Wagner. And then there is Hans Sachs' song, which knows to combine this life experience, emotion, and the rules, and that is the real master song. I have studied this in my essay on improvisation in music, because improvisation is something which happens. Yes, here it is. It's in my book. It is Science of Music. I once wrote it for the. It was in Luzern was the improvisation days by the local conservatory, and I had a series on the improvisation. So it's chapter here, and then there I just deal with this. But let us have a look for the first. Most important thing musically is that the prelude was written first, alone, without any text. And the prelude, in fact, is the plan of the whole great finale. So that when the finale starts, we know, aha, that is something like Ouverture, but it is expanded. So Wagner has put there all kinds of intervening episodes, but it always returns to the structure of the prelude, so that prelude gives the whole idea of the... And that is musically the most important in the whole opera. Let's see, here I have the Mastersingers piano version by Richard Kleinmichel. There are always big differences, by the way, between these piano arrangements, but it is, of course. With this March of the Mastersingers, sehr mäßig bewegt, durchweg breit und gewichtig, very broad and heaviness, so it must be something very German. The best conducting which I've heard is by Wagner, definitely, because he has the right tempo. But then Prelude also has all the major themes of the and it has this also the and also this when they are mocking, parodizing Beckmester. So in that, and then we have of course the return. When the overture is over, we go directly to church. Luther type chorale, which is sing-song, and that is one of the most impressive dramatic contrasts that we have the brilliant concerto style overture, and then suddenly the door opens and we are in church, and we have this choir. Then the song which Walter presents, which is not accepted by Am stillen Herd. It's not like that. And then, of course, there is very much interesting music throughout. Opera is very long, by the way. I'm always thinking that it is a little bit too long, especially in the night scene. There is this nocturnal scene which is very, very long, and also the finale. So that I don't know what to think about that. But then in the third act, we are in Hans Sachs. We are this. Music is very serious. That is just the Wahn theme of Hans Sachs. And then when he tells about the character of the real Meister Gesang, we have extremely melodious, we could say. The whole style is very diatonic, so it is essentially in very clear tonalities. Well, Karl Dahlhaus says that it is a kind of secondary diatonality, so that behind this is certainly Tristan and its chromatic word, and this emerges from that as a kind of restoration style, as a conscious return back to this ideal utopian Nuremberg society. But then comes this Mastersingers. That was stolen. So that, but it is very good, but your melody is a little bit free. And then Walter repeats. So that is a little bit comical. It is written that it is how it was swollen, so it is swallowed. It is not quite. So it is even that melody which is then given very much at the end is seen in that light. So not quite. And then of course at the end we have this all this huge parade and this totally intoxicating music. Completely. Here is Austradals view. It's repeated, and then very well is done this well. And Hans Sachs is intervening. all together here for the Hans Sachs recitativa. Continues until we get there again. And we reach the finale. So it is absolutely great symphonic music already, I would say. Now we have to also say something about the reception, because this opera had a quite special phases. Namely, 1871 broke this war between Prussia and Austria, where Austria was put under the German power. And then between Prussia and France. And of course Germany won it, and then as we know, Germany was unified finally, it became Germany. And the Emperor of Germany was crowned in Versailles, France, which was a great humiliation for the Frenchmen, certainly. But then the opera of Wagner, which became very popular just during this war, and which got a patriotic meaning, was just Mastersingers. That was not at all the original intention of Wagner to write any type of praise of the German nation or emperor, not in the least, because what Hans Sachs is praising at the end, after all, is not at all anything related with the state of Germany, but it's just its culture and its holy music. That is the only thing which he wants to say. And Wagner himself, if we think of when he wrote about what is the German character, he said that Germans do not want to conquer any other countries, and they just want to be earnest and noble and mild and respect others, and their compassion should be their highest virtue altogether. But Wagner couldn't resist that his opera became very popular, and just still 1910s, 1920s, it was custom in German opera houses that the audience at the end stood up and then they sang together Deutschland über alles as the national hymn. So it adopted that type of meaning. Well, then it had different interpretations later, as we know, in Germany. But after the war, when Bayreuth was opened in 1951, the first opera they gave was just Mastersingers, teaching, staging, and then they put their an announcement, big table, that hier gilt's nur Kunst. Only the art means something here. So that is in which sense we now receive this wonderful opera by Wagner.